achieveradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/achieveradio.
Here we go now. Go to the Carolyn. Here we go now. Here we go now. The wellness scene with Dr. D. Here we go now. Here we go now. Go to the Carolyn. The wellness scene with Dr. D.
All right, everybody, welcome to Dr. Carolyn Dean Live here on achieveradio.com. And yes, here we go now once again, another extraordinary week of fantastic content and interactions with our very own Dr. Carolyn Dean, the doctor of the future, one of the most extraordinary women on the planet, if I don't mind saying so myself. And we're so happy this evening, the first Monday of May, as everybody knows, is our Doctor to Doctor series. And this is when Dr. Dean gets a chance to talk with and interact with other like-minded doctors and professionals who are on the same wavelength, shall we say, as she is, about natural health and seeking safe solutions for the body, mind, and spirit in terms of not only her formulas but other strategies. And tonight we are joined for our Doctor to Doctor series with Dr. Christiane Northrup, who, as we know, is a visionary pioneer and a leading authority in the field of women's health and wellness. And, she's so well known, ladies and gentlemen, as so many of you know Dr. Northrup. You've read her books. You've seen her on Oprah, the Today Show. You know that she's spent her life really as an advocate for women's health and wellness because, as you know, she used to practice as an OBGYN for 25 years, and then she took on this mantle of educator and of being a writer and of speaking to women about so many issues. And with Women's Body, Women's Wisdom, which came out in 1994, I know I had the book. All my friends had the book. We read the book, and it was the first time that anybody was talking to women about their bodies, and it was extraordinary, and it launched her into another trajectory of impact in her career. And this very same can be said of our very own Dr. Dean with her landmark work, The Magnesium Miracle, and all that she's done as an advocate for women and men and their bodies and natural solutions. So this is just going to be the most super cool and groovy, hypercharged, fun evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so excited for it. And I want to also say welcome to Dr. Carolyn. Hello, Dr. Dean. You are there, yes?
I am here. I am with you all the way, Jenny.
And then also, I'm looking for Dr. Northrup, and there's so many callers on the Turbo Bridge. I need Dr. Northrup if she could just hit *5 on her keypad. That will let me know which one of these wonderful callers is Dr. Northrup, and I will take her phone off mute and bring her on with us. Okay, very good. Hello, Dr. Northrup.
Hello. What a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you for coming. Yes, thank you for coming back. We just loved the interaction before, and now we have your book to talk about. I'm going to let Ginny lead off. Dr. Northrup, Christiane, Chris, how shall we address you?
Let's just call me Chris. You and I are, we have been such pioneers. We have been out here for many, many years banging this drum, and it's exciting to finally have the technology to get the message out. So let's just, we'll just do Chris. It's fine.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, we both heard your interview with our friend Michael Sandler. I know we could just put the on button on, turn the on switch, and you would just take over and tell us so much. But we have to pretend that we're interviewing you. So I'll let you start off. Okay, Chris?
I love it. I love it, yes.
Yes, so we have to pretend that. That's right. But that was a great interview. And, boy, you know, your book is so exciting, and I want to tell our listeners about it. And everybody, again, of course, knows that Dr. Northrup has written so many wonderful books. I mean, so many. But right now, the book that she is talking about and is super excited about is her newest release called Dodging Energy Vampires. And she is instructing people on what is an energy vampire and basically learning how to identify with people who drain your own energy, and then also how to protect your energy, and then also discovering techniques to heal yourself when you have been drained of your energy. And I think that this is such an enormously powerful book, Dr. Northrup, Chris, because of the fact that so many women get caught up in this. So first of all, tell us how you got inspired to even write the book.
Well, I could have called it Dodging Energy Vampires, an Autobiography. But so I learned about this the hard way. You know, this isn't just an intellectual thing. I learned about it from having so many interactions with these people. Any family doc or any primary care doctor will tell you, or they may not know this, but they should, that 25 to 30% of the patient load of any primary care doctor is people who have personality disorders. And that's how I'm referring to an energy vampire. And when I say personality disorders, we are not talking about a biochemical imbalance. We're not talking about something that is easily diagnosable. And in fact, it's called in the DSM-5, that's the diagnostic manual for mental problems, it's called cluster B. And I don't know where B comes from, by the way, but it includes narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic, almost all of them, antisocial. Almost all of them have in common, though, the self-centered narcissistic problem. It's about 1 in 5 people, and there's a spectrum, just like with autism. So you can have someone, you know, we say they're a little on the spectrum, right? They're a little Aspergery, or they're full-blown in diapers and moaning at age 25. So that's the autism spectrum. In personality disorder, you can have someone who's got some narcissistic traits, and then you can have the full-blown psychopath, and that's 1 in 25 people. That would be someone like Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby. And these are people who are enormously charming, and they pull the wool over everyone's eyes. And as some of the people involved with this for their entire lifetimes, they have said, these people have the ability to tilt society strangely in their favor. Now, I'm hoping that that is changing a bit with the Me Too movement, because when I think of an energy vampire, you know, we tend to think of a sociopathic man who might be a womanizer. He might be somebody who has preyed upon women. But you and I both know, because I know you've had these characters as patients, borderline women suck the living daylights out of good men. And there's a special group of women and men that Sandra Brown has identified and done research on at Purdue. And these are the individuals with super traits. And I want to talk particularly to these people. I identify as one of these. We are resourceful, we're loyal, we're hardworking, we're optimistic. We have the feeling that we really can't be harmed because we're sort of so good at what we do. And we see the red flags in other people, but we think that we can save them because in our in our jobs as healers, we really are quite effective. But with these people in our most intimate relationships, we're not effective because, and this is very hard for people, especially spiritual people, people of goodwill, we are brought up with the belief that we are all one and everyone is good at heart. And the only reason someone would act with no conscience, or the only reason someone would act the way they do with ill intent, is because they've been hurt in childhood. And we know from all the research that that is simply not true. But for those of us who are targeted by these individuals, that's a very difficult belief to give up. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that after years and years on the front lines of medicine, I was seeing, as you are too, all these people who have so-called mystery diseases, mystery illnesses, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, the autoimmune disorders like lupus. And I was finding that no matter what they did, including Remag and Remite, by the way, they just didn't get better until they identified and did something about the energy leakage in their own lives. So if they were being criticized constantly or constantly trying to measure up with an energy vampire who could be a spouse or a parent or a boss, their life energy literally gets leaked away. And I believe, though we don't really have a way to measure this, if you look at some of the research that's been done on the human energy field, you know, there are people who can measure the human energy field. And I know, absolutely know, that when you're around someone like this, they are literally plugged in to your energy field, and they are taking energy from you. You have to manufacture more and more ATP just to stay awake. And if you've been around one of these people where you couldn't stay awake, where you literally were going to fall asleep in your soup, you know what I'm talking about. And so I wrote the book because I wanted to get out in front of this trend as far as I could. This is preventive medicine as far upstream as I can possibly go. So I'm certain anyone who's involved in the healing professions has someone like this in their life. As I'm talking, I am sure that many of you listening are starting to have names pop into your head.
Well, that's incredible. I think you've answered my first question. Here I am, you know, the sensitive who sees the good in everyone, wondering, is there treatment for energy vampires?
You know, what's interesting is Sandra Brown started her work. She wrote Women Who Love Psychopaths. And I have to tell you, I had this book in my house for 4 years, and I couldn't look at it. I just couldn't believe that things were this bad. And she started her career running groups for men with narcissistic personality disorder. And here's what doesn't work. So let's be clear on what doesn't work. Talk therapy and insight does not work. What works in those who have traits, not full-blown, because if you look at a full-blown psychopath, someone with no conscience, that's, remember, 1 in 25 people, which is 100,000 in New York City alone, most of whom are not psychopathic killers. They're operating under the radar. There is no treatment for these people because their behavior is what's called ego-syntonic. They believe that we are stupid and we're suckers. They can see how we think. They can see our compassion. That's what they use to get their needs met. Let me just give you a grisly example from the book Without Conscience by Robert Hare, who is a world expert on psychopathy. And so this was a guy who killed a waiter in a restaurant. And I don't know what the argument was about, but the psychopath, the killer, said, oh, he was a terrible actor. He wasn't going to get anywhere anyway. I did him a favor. So they literally believe that they're right and we're stupid. So the ones on the far end of the spectrum, there's no treatment for, and what Dr. Hare points out is the parole board, the judicial system, they do not understand this, and these characters should all win Oscars for their performances. They often, in prison, will be the ones who clean up the best. They find Jesus. They say, I'll never do it again. They are so charming that the staff falls in love with them and cannot believe that they would do it again. So those people, you just have to keep them away from the rest of us. Now, for someone with narcissistic traits, here's what they need to understand. When they face what's called the cost of loss, so let's say you're a 42-year-old man and your wife finally wakes up to the fact that you're really not there for her and you're more about your career and looking good, and maybe you flirt with other women. So she finally gets fed up and says she's leaving. Now, so this is the only thing that's ever changed any one of them, is she means it. She's leaving. She has her apartment. She is ready to go. She doesn't care one way or another if they ever get better. You see, one of the problems for someone like you and me, Carolyn, is we will hang out with someone for 200 years because we can see their potential, and we really can see their potential. But the problem is, it's just potential. It's not, they're not doing anything with it. So the only way they change is when you finally withdraw your attention from them, your so-called narcissistic supply, that's the energy they live on, your praise, your money, your sexuality, you making them look good, you cleaning up after them, that's all narcissistic supply, and you have to be out the door. Only then, and I've only seen it once in my whole career, did the guy change, and he changed by going to a therapist who understood narcissistic personality disorder. So the treatment is then cognitive behavioral therapy. You never ask these people, why did you do this? It doesn't matter. What George Simon, who wrote In Sheep's Clothing, teaches is these people are fighting for control, and they know that getting you on the defensive is the best position, because once you get someone on the defensive, you have the upper hand. And so they're being passive-aggressive all the time. And what happens for us healers and for us empaths is we are always willing to look at ways to improve, or ways to explain it better, or ways to somehow be a better human being. They know this, and so they get you on the run, they get you on the defensive. And so a therapist has to know how this works. So here's an example. A narcissist, self-centered person hits you and says, well, she's been riding up my ass all day long. She made me do it. Okay, a compassionate therapist will look at them with unconditional love and say, really? Did she go into your motor cortex and move your arm? Well, I guess not. So when George Simon works with these people, and he's the only guy I've ever known who has worked with any number of them, he said when some of them get into their 60s, they don't like who they see in the mirror, and they really want to change. But it is so rare. But let me tell you how to speed it up, everybody. You want to speed up the healing of energy vampires? Withdraw your energy from them. That is the most compassionate thing you can do. So the only thing that may work is a therapist who understands the disorder. Anger management does not work. Insight therapy does not work. Maybe cognitive behavioral therapy might work, but again, it's got to be with someone who will call them on their BS every time. And that takes a very certain kind of therapist. And Dr. Simon said when he was teaching this to therapists 25 years ago, many would get up and leave. And the reason they did is they went into this field out of compassion and to help people. And they just could not recover from the belief that these people were acting out of childhood pain. And so the worst possible thing you can do is make excuses for them, coddle them, try to understand them, try to meet them with love. No, you have to focus just on their behavior, just on the behavior. You said you would do this, you didn't. Period, end of story. And they will always hook the empath with a sob story. Always. That's how they hook you. I'm so depressed. I got divorced. My wife won't let me see the children. And then the empath in you goes, oh, you poor thing, that what a wonderful man, he misses his children. A person who has normal empathy will pay attention to their gut, and they'll go, God, what a loser. But we don't do that. We just think, oh, I can help you. So we really see the red flags, but we think it doesn't apply to us, and then we get into trouble. And frankly, society has not helped because they've literally given these characters a get-out-of-jail-free card for centuries.
Wow. Yeah, that's excavating really deeply into the human psyche. When you think of 25% of the population, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get my foster son, who's a judge, to read at least Simon's book so he knows who he's up against.
That's exactly right, because the legal system, until recently, has been bamboozled by these people. Like, let's say that you're going in and you're going through divorce. You can never count on a narcissist to tell the truth or to show up like they say they will. They lie. Melanie Tonya Evans has a wonderful acronym for it and what we're all afraid of, and she calls it CRAP. So you're afraid of criticism, rejection, abandonment, and punishment. That's what they do. Criticize, abandon, reject, and punish. And for those of us who are highly sensitive, the healer types, the compassionate types, that just feels terrible. So you keep trying to improve yourself so that they will accept you. And then they'll change the game from that. So as soon as you sort of step up, they'll change the game. And they don't act right. They don't act the way you think they should, and you can't even imagine being one of these people. You just can't believe that they think the way they do, but they do.
Yes, I just thought they were criminals myself, but
No, see, that's the thing. Most are not criminals. If you look at what's happened, I can't remember the name of the guy, but there was some guy who made all the papers a couple months ago who was a young head of a pharmaceutical company, and he was charging $5,000 per dose for an HIV medicine. It's the many, many times it's the CEOs of these companies that look at what happened to Wells Fargo in the United States. The CEO of Wells Fargo told his employees to sign up people for accounts. So they opened accounts for many of their customers. Their customers didn't even know that these new accounts were being opened, and he did it in order to comply with some federal standard. And then when the employees did this and people found out that they had all these accounts they didn't know about, the employees were fired, and the CEO was let go, but with a $25 million parachute package. Now, that's criminal, but that's just called business as usual. And so that's the macrocosmic level where we have let people get away with this. But in our own daily lives, we see this, like we might see a parent who is taken in by one of these characters. And it's very hard when it's someone in your family, and that's really, we can't take on Wall Street. This is very interesting. I just got a comment on one of my blogs. My elderly mother has been in an emotionally abusive relationship with a narcissist for many years. It is with a childhood friend she reconnected with many years after my father died. He has gaslighted her and sucked so much of her life out of her. She is a shell of her former self. He convinced her to sell her home and nearly all of her possessions to move into a retirement community with him. They share an apartment. Mom just turned 90. Her mother is still living. She's 98. Grandma is amazing and is the smartest person in our family. Mom, and then she just says, her mom is showing some signs of dementia unsteady. She's constantly interrupted and demeaned by this man and has been forced to live her life so differently than she ever did. She used to teach water aerobics. Now she doesn't exercise at all. She used to eat so healthy, giant salads, delicious fruits and vegetables, amazing meals she'd create for him, only to be dismissed with, "What's that? I don't eat anything green." She used to live in the kitchen, read cookbooks like novels. She adored cooking. She's been forced to give that up entirely. And she just goes on and on and on, and she wonders, what can I do for my mother? And I said, what you can do is, if you can get her alone, you can tell her what you're seeing, number one. Then you let that go. And then number two, you spend time every day, maybe 2 minutes, seeing her on a quantum level as the person she really is when she's not being drained dry by an energy vampire. Because what does not work is telling someone who's not ready that this is what's going on. Mostly they won't hear it, and the person telling them will then get rejected. So there's not a whole lot you can do until someone's ready to see the pattern. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you mentioned earlier about there's the physical and the emotional, and you said it's pretty hard for people to make a shift, even if they're taking the minerals. But we have found it, and I know you have too, and you say it on your radio shows, that to have the energy to make a shift or make a move, you do have to give your body some grounding and the nutrients, the building blocks that will get your adrenals back and do all the rest.
And in fact, Karen Brody, who wrote a wonderful book called Daring to Rest, she teaches Yoga Nidra. She has a 40-day rest challenge. Okay, so for 30 minutes a day, women rest. She said at the end of the 40 days, the majority of her people file for divorce. So you're absolutely right. They get well rested, and then they have enough energy. You are absolutely right. I mean, if you think about the minerals, that is giving you the electrical charge to even get yourself up off the floor and get moving. And so there isn't any question that would be the first step for anybody, is replenish your body so that your endocrine, immune, and central nervous system has at least the spark that it needs to get your nerves firing and your hormones created and so on. I agree with you. That would be the absolute first step. And then the other would be to, because the harm from these relationships is inevitable. Almost no one that I know can stay in this relationship day in, day out and remain healthy. I know it's probably possible, but generally my experience is you have to call on God, your higher power, remineralize yourself, and then make a plan to get out.
Right. Well, it's interesting, and Jenny will help me out here, because I think what we're hearing from our customers, Chris, is they'll give the litany of all the horrors they've been through, and the majority of them are divorced or widowed, and they look back at what they went through. Jenny, do you see that across the desk?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we do see a lot of people who have, as Chris was saying, and Carolyn has said this so many times as well, Chris, that, once you get the biological aspects of a person and we know that they're being properly nourished and stuff, and then they still have symptoms, then you have to start looking at the emotional, mental conflicts. And a lot of our people are in recovery from long-term situations such as you're alluding to, but never with this degree of clarity, probably. Carolyn, would you say?
Yes. Just mainly our focus being online dietary supplements. We don't get into the medical aspect. So what happens is I'll go into total biology, which is an offshoot pretty much of German New Medicine, looking at the conflict basis of disease and what are the conflicts that cause you to have that pain in the neck. Is somebody causing you the pain in the neck? But what you're giving us here is a diagnostic so that people can, instead of taking action, that's all we ever do as women. We take action to try to solve the problem, and we're exhausted. We're crawling on the floor, and we get up and take action. And if we don't or can't, we feel guilty. And I call it lying down therapy. You just have to lie down.
Yes, there's a wonderful book out now by Mara Chapman, and it's called Unshakable Confidence. I love the book. She's taught women mindfulness meditation for years and years, and she said, in patriarchy, in a culture where that which is feminine has been seen as inferior to that which is masculine, what we do, we women, because we've been second-class citizens, we're kind of like the servants on Downton Abbey, or in any of those large houses in England. Your survival, your ability to put food on the table, to even have a bed to sleep in, depends upon how well you meet the perceived needs of those who are in charge. And so she said what we call codependence is really what she calls othering. And I love that, because we have had our behavior so pathologized, like we're rescue addicts, we're codependents, we're whatever it is, or we're relationship addicts, when in fact all of those things are normal adaptations to a culture that has not valued the nurturing and the contribution of the feminine. I mean, both in men and women. So you were just saying, we women think, okay, it's our job to fix it, so we're going to be superwoman, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And if you can't manage, then you think something is wrong with you, instead of realizing, wait a minute. I mean, I'll never forget, Carolyn, when I went back to work after my second child was born. Really, this was like a revelation. I go back to work as an OBGYN, doing surgery, delivering babies, the whole thing, and my time in the office was so easy compared to being home with 2 little kids. I remember thinking, oh, my God, the men have been pulling the wool over our eyes for centuries. I have a staff. I have people who take the phone calls. I have people here supporting me. It was so easy compared to the 24/7 on-callness of taking care of 2 little kids and a husband. So I thought, this is simple. Going to work, that's easy. So, you know, it was sort of my wake-up call. But this particular set of instructions, the Dodging Energy Vampires, was, to me, a kind of a revelation that really finally occurred to me after about maybe my 9th or 10th relationship with an energy vampire in business situations. I had my own Harvey Weinstein, a guy who I thought I needed to help me develop the supplement line with Praeria mirifica. I later found out, I mean, this guy put me up in the honeymoon suite of a hotel in Copenhagen. I later find that's where he had his honeymoon with his ex-wife. He was constantly calling me, sending me poems, love-bombing me, and later I found out after the whole thing was over, when I finally said, wait, this shell game, this is too crazy, I found out that he had 4 different passports and had probably worked for the Israeli Secret Service. But that's how charming he was. And my own lawyer said, in 30 years, and this is a very sophisticated lawyer in New York City who's had John Grisham as a client and, you know, the Jimi Hendrix people, he said, I've never seen anyone this clever in my life. So none of us should feel stupid or bad for being taken in by a really clever narcissist. They, as Sandra Brown says, they are sicker than you are smart. Now, isn't that a phrase? They are sicker than you are smart. And she said, in the era of Oprah positive psychology, you know, because Oprah's done an awful lot with that, she said women are far more interested in listening to Oprah's positive psychology than they are believing me about these people. And we know that when you believe that people are good at heart, but you're living with someone who's constantly putting you down, it leads to what's called cognitive dissonance and eventual executive function disorder in the frontal lobes of the brain. So you get foggy thinking, you don't trust yourself, and it takes a while to come back. I have a friend who was finally helped with EMDR, the rapid eye movement therapy, where she had just literally been brainwashed into thinking that something was wrong with her. Or here's another one. If only, because many, many times, if you've been in relationship with one of these people, you'll finally wake up and they will be engaged to be married to someone else within like 15 minutes after a 25-year marriage. And it's so devastating. You go, wait a minute, what could I have done differently? Because you suddenly think, oh, man, with this woman or this man, it's going to be different. They will finally have unlocked the key to this person. They will have finally unlocked the goodness in this person that I've seen my whole life, but I could never elicit it. And so you have this absolute despair that you were not able to get this person to love you. What could you have done differently? How could you have done anything more? And the answer is you probably did 10 to 15 years too much and should have gotten out sooner, because this actually has nothing to do with you. Yeah.
Well,
I know, it's sobering. It's sobering, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very sobering. And I think this does happen to a lot of people. One of our people on our chat line, Dr. Northrup, is typing in and saying, tears, tears, tears. Oh, my God, this was my life, and this speaks to me. So I do think that, the complexity of what you're establishing here and the awareness that you have of it is certainly something that other people have experienced, and probably they think they're crazy.
That's exactly what happens. That's exactly right. We think we're crazy, and that is the and because here's why. We are willing. We're willing to take a look at our stuff. We're so willing. Matt Kahn, the spiritual teacher Matt Kahn, says most healers and empaths are born with an inferior ego. We keep our ego alive by looking for things to improve about ourselves. Narcissists are born with a superior ego. They think they're better than everyone else. So, that's how we keep the game going. And when one of us just finally drops the ball, then we have a chance. And I think that's the deal. We have to finally get some reality testing. And you do that by reading a book like Dodging Energy Vampires, taking a course with Melanie Tonya Evans, who has Thriver TV and a narcissistic abuse recovery program. I have my Dodging Energy Vampires online course. Education is the very first step, but you cannot heal just cognitively, and you know that. It's like if somebody is deficient in magnesium and the other minerals, it doesn't matter how positive your thinking is. You need the mineral to make the nerves fire properly, right? And by the same token, we heal on an inner level. We heal by caring for the little child inside who chances are was wounded somewhere along the line by having a narcissistic parent or grandparent or somebody. And they, as Matt Kahn says, we are brought up to believe that in order to be liked by them, we have to be like them. And so many of us are black sheep. And, and if I think about your radio show and your mission as a doctor, who wouldn't be, the people attracted to you are the same people attracted to me, which is they've tried all the conventional stuff. It doesn't work. We are actually on the leading edge of health and healing, but we're also the old souls who I believe in the morphogenic field of the earth have been the ones who were burned at the stake, had our throats slit, or pushed off the mountain for being the shamans and the healers in our tribes. And many, many, many of us are black sheep. And so we believe something is wrong with us when, in fact, we carry a lot of light. And let me just say one more thing. That light from which is compassion and from being on earth over and over, that light is very irritating to vampires. If you've ever watched the Twilight series, you know that vampires cannot be out in the sunlight. They don't like the light. And we are irritating when we stand in the light. So it's just important to know that there's nothing wrong with us. Nothing. The only thing that is wrong with us is we think that something is wrong with us. My current mission, I say, I'm a leading authority on everything that can go right with the female body and how to make that your experience. I mean, if you look at the history of gynecology and, being ashamed of our periods and being ashamed of going through menopause or being, put down for the organs that identify you as female, I don't trust anything that, that bleeds and doesn't die. I've literally had patients have men say that to them, teenagers. I don't trust anything that, bleeds and doesn't die. I mean, there's all kinds of shame that have been landed on those people who feel more and are empathic and are intuitive. And I believe that's our crowd.
Hello, Christiane. Chris, this is Bob. what happens if two energy vampires are forced to be with each other for a while?
You know, it can work for about 2 years. I've found this.
Yeah.
These are the people who tend to be married 5, 6, 7 times. And they're fantastic for a while because they love the way it looks and they like reveling in each other's appearance and so on. In fact, you kind of hope that they find each other and stay away from you. They'll tend to move on. Anne Schaaf said something very funny in the past. She had a book called The Pseudo-Relationship Addictions, and she said, sex addicts come on, romance addicts move on, and relationship addicts hang on. But I believe that a lot of these energy vampires are romance addicts. They're addicted to how it looks. Look at Hollywood and those people who have one marriage after another because they're under the illusion that looking good and having fame is actually something that's worth anything, you know, which it isn't at the end of the day. I mean, anyone who's ever been around that, if you watch the documentary Bright Lights, Debbie Reynolds and her daughter, you'll see what the pursuit of fame leads to. It's not real. What's real is a connection with source. So, yeah, energy vampires often marry each other or are with each other, and better that they're with each other than someone like me. Yeah. Okay,
so something even more bizarre. Carol and I are energy vampires. We're also empaths. What happens when you're both?
I actually don't believe that's possible, by the way. Here's what I find. Empaths are always worried. It's the first thing they worry about. Am I an energy vampire? No real energy vampire ever asks that question. Not ever. Not ever. They are certain that they are not. So you really are not both. But I applaud you for even considering, God, maybe it's me. No, it's not.
Yeah, and you may not be familiar with our RNA drops, but some of the syndromes of the energy vampires is what happens to people on the RNA drops. They think they're getting better, and they seem to be getting better, more confident, and they actually get bothered by people more. They're more sensitive to people's silliness. So what do you think of that, Carolyn or Ginny? What about the syndromes of symptoms that RNA drops seem to positively create in people?
Well, perhaps they're just making people aware of other people being energy vampires or wasting their time, and they.
Yeah, that does happen. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yep.
And you know about our RNA drops, don't you, Chris?
What? Yeah, I'm taking them. Yeah.
I'm taking them. Right.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I am getting healthier and healthier and healthier. See, at this point, if somebody is an energy vampire, it does not take me long to sniff it out, whereas in the past, okay, so here's what I've done. I have a timeline, and so I look at my long-term relationships, like, childhood friends. That might be a 45-year relationship till I wake up. And then, marriage, 24, then another person, work colleague, 12. And so now I'm down to, I can generally figure it out within a month or 2 months. And please remember, the energy vampires are attracted to the empath. They see your light, and they're attracted to you like a moth to a flame because they know that you have a lot of energy, and they can live off of your light for a long time. But if you're taking, let's say, the RNA drops or the Remag and the Remite, and your electromagnetic field becomes strong, then it's not going to take you very long to realize, wait a minute. So you kind of come home to yourself is what happens. So you're not looking for love in all the wrong places.
Right, and what we try to instill in our customers is that they're actually really the only ones responsible for their own health. We're just there to give them a bit of a pep talk. And when you take responsibility for your health, that does sort of flow over into your emotional health as well. Some of our staff on customer service, and certainly Ginny went through this in her ministry, it's their light workers who take it all on, and finally when they back up a bit, they get on the formulas, they start detaching from what's being thrown at them. People just sort of come into their own godhood, we say, and the sky may fall, but it's not going to fall on us, and we don't take responsibility for the rest of the world. So that is so important.
It's such a relief. You know, I was good friends with Peter Calhoun, the late Peter Calhoun, who was first an Episcopal minister with a huge congregation, and then he became a shaman because energy stuff started to happen to him. He died really kind of too early because he and his wife so wanted people to get better that they used their personal love to try to heal people. You know, when we want it more for someone than they want it for themselves, we're in trouble. And so what we have to do is we can be very compassionate and very loving to everyone, including energy vampires. We don't wish anyone well, but what you do is you send divine love or God's love to them, and you keep your personal love for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Very good.
Yes. Loving humans, but remaining detached. Because yes, I think in our work, our RNA reset work, I think people come out of desperation and they think they have someone to cling to, and we just go Teflon on them and make sure they realize that they're strong enough to take care of themselves. So that's the first lesson that people really need to learn.
Yeah, I love what you said. You just go Teflon on them. That is what all of us need to learn, especially around energy vampires. So I often teach people the first thing, you know, how do you act? So you begin to change the dynamic. And I said you act like a gray rock. Because they want your energy. It doesn't matter if you're angry or if you're loving or if you're excited. They want your energy. You know, talk about me good, talk about me bad, just talk about me. So when you become Teflon or you become a gray rock and you're not giving anything, then they quickly go to find another source. You're no longer it. So I think that's such a great lesson with customer service and all the rest of it. You become Teflon. Otherwise, you really get this borderline personality kind of person who is this, help me, you can't. You know, these are the people who go to the emergency room, we call them frequent flyers, 270 times a year. And they show up and they say, you know, I feel like I'm going to commit suicide, 275 times a year. Then they get admitted, they go to the floor, you know, they have a teddy bear, and then they begin to demand special meals. So Marsha Linehan developed a type of therapy for borderline personality disorder called DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy. And in those who do it, it's very spiritual, very Buddhist, so that they can tune into what they're really feeling. And Marsha, first thing she says to people like this who say, you know, I'm suicidal, I feel like I'm going to kill myself, she puts it right back on them and says, why don't you? What's keeping you from doing that? But see, the rest of us are terrified of speaking up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, Carolyn, when Ian says love is not an emotion, it's a force field, that seems to fit here. when you learn that love is not an emotion but a force field, that might be the perception you're moving towards, Christiane.
I like that. I know that love is toxic. It's a venom to a toxic person. So Dr. Mario Martinez has a wonderful teaching on this. He wrote the Mind-Body Code and started the Biocognitive Institute. And he said, you can tell how much love a person can take by, let's say you go and you visit a toxic mother, and you just see how long it takes for her to start going negative on you. So if it's 15 minutes, then she can take 15 minutes worth of love. So that's milligrams of love. If after 15 minutes she starts to criticize you, the way you raise your children, or your hair's not looking good, or you've gained a few pounds, then you know, okay, I have 15 minutes or I have 30 minutes to be with this person before they get toxic, and then you leave. And I mean, that's a very good strategy if you have a parent who's an energy vampire. You figure out how long the visit can last before they start attacking you, and then you guard your own heart, because I think this is the person we leave out in these situations. We leave out ourselves because we've been taught it is more blessed to give than to receive. Don't be selfish, all of that. You must include yourself in those you are serving.
Now, one of the things, Chris, that one of our people on the chat line typed in and asked was, to your point about this, I think it relates, is how does the work of the World Service Institute support us in the problem of energy vampires? And I was wondering, are you familiar with their work?
Oh, yes, I know Bob Fritchie very well. I love Bob. Yeah, we talk a lot. Yeah, so Bob is, let me tell you how I met Bob Fritchie, because this was very key in my development as a healer. I was doing work with the Bruno Gröning Circle of Friends, and Bruno Gröning was a German healer who came to great fame in 1949, right after World War II in Germany. And as you might imagine, Germany in 1949 was a pretty devastated place. And Bruno Gröning would speak in front of crowds, and this gland in his neck would swell. There's a documentary about him on YouTube, so you can just go and Google this, and people would heal just listening to him speak. They would get up out of wheelchairs, they'd drop their crutches, and so the Bruno Gröning Circle of Friends, a couple of docs came here to teach about his work. And so we opened some healing circles and learned the process of it's called Einstellen, or tuning into the healing stream. And that was to sit with your arms and legs uncrossed, putting your palms up, and receiving the Heilstrom, or the healing stream. And that's how Bruno Gröning taught people. We had many people heal from Lyme disease and all kinds of things, but the Bruno Gröning Circle of Friends was and is very Germanic in their approach. In other words, they wanted the meetings run a certain way. You had to have a secretary and a treasurer, and you had to take notes, and you had to send them back to Germany. And every time I would teach this from the stage, someone would have a healing, because it isn't me. It's the Heilstrom, it's the healing stream. And, I started to get some criticism from the organization for teaching this in a way that they didn't feel was according to their rules. And I thought, wait, no. You cannot contain divine love in a structure. This is something that's free to everybody. And then I met Bob. And Bob Fritchie had worked with Marcel Vogel of IBM for 25 years. And Bob was a chemical engineer, used to do a lot with aerospace. And after retirement, he was watching a TV show called One Step Beyond. And he saw Marcel Vogel on this show, who had 100 patents in crystal technology with IBM. And he realized he needed to go and see Marcel. They became good friends. And they studied energy medicine for 25 years. So Bob worked with shamans, and he worked with everything. And he taught then, they worked with Vogel crystals, and you can still look up Vogel crystals. But then Bob and Marcel realized the human body is itself a crystal. Teeth are crystals. The collagen fibers of the fascia are crystals. And so divine love, or God's love, is distributed throughout the body, starting in the thymus gland, and then throughout the body. And so Bob teaches a divine love healing system, and he has the same rules. You don't cross your arms or your legs because the body is a battery, exactly the same as Bruno Gruning taught. Only this time, Bob said divine love has stabilized on the planet in 2012, which, by the way, goes along with all of the prophecies of all the indigenous people, that if we made it to December 21st, 2012, then we would not blow ourselves up. That's the end of the Mayan calendar. It just means we're in a new time, or the turning of the ages. And at that time, divine love stabilized on the planet. So as Bob has pointed out, you can do a healing on yourself, whereas before that, it took about 5 people doing divine love on your behalf. We're using their bodies as a battery to magnify it in your direction. Now we can all do this on our own. And so this would absolutely, just staying in contact with divine love will very much help you dodge energy vampires, because you are, in fact, strengthening your own electromagnetic field. Bob is the one who taught me that divine love is venom to an energy vampire. So he went into a dojo where this guy was being abusive with Qigong to his young students, and he was going to attack Bob. Bob just put up his hand and sent divine love to this man, and he went crashing against the opposite wall. So it's very powerful, and it will, if you go walk out of your house in the morning and you say, I accept divine love, and I send divine love out from me and behind me on my path, and then you pulse your breath. So you just take your breath in like this, pulse it out, you just pulse it out through your nose. You're connected with divine love, and it's very, very protective.
Outstanding. Excellent. Very, very good. Okay, wonderful. Another comment here, Christiane, was I wonder if this is why women romanticize BDSM. They believe that they live to serve their partner. Do you have any thoughts about that?
What's BDSM? Oh,
I think that
we're talking about sadomasochism?
I believe so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. There's a wonderful description of that in Paulo Coelho's book, 11 Minutes. And 11 minutes is the amount of time that most people actually are engaged in sex. And the reason that is relevant to the book is it's based on a true story of a woman from Brazil who thought that she was going to Switzerland to be in a good job. And when she got there, she realized that she was going to be working in a brothel. And she fell in love with a man came, and all he wanted to do was talk to her. They fell in love. He eventually married her. But one of her clients asked her to engage in S&M practices, whips, chains, whatever. And the protagonist in the book says to her, don't go down that path, because the deeper down you go, the darker it gets, and there's no bottom to that abyss. So when you are in a heightened state of sexual desire or sexual energy, when you are hurting somebody or you are degrading somebody, then you're creating the energy of a lot of adrenaline and cortisol, and you're combining it with the degradation. And like any addiction, it takes more and more to get the same effect. It's like if a woman always needs a vibrator to achieve orgasm, what happens over time is you need a stronger and a stronger vibrator to get the same effect. Whereas what we really each want to do in our lives is feel more and more with less and less stimulation. In other words, become so sensitive to the smell of a flower, the touch of a lover, any of those things that you feel more and more with less and less. Now, I know that there are those who would argue with me that sadomasochistic practices in sexuality are a pathway to the divine, to each his own, but I have never seen that enhance anyone's life in particular. It does make good television. There's a miniseries called Billions where the husband-wife, Giamatti, is one of the guys, great actor, where, it makes great television, and Angelina Jolie looked pretty darn good in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but I really do not think that this is any pathway to true health.
Excellent. Very good. Excellent. Well, we know, honestly, yes, and I think that's what we're talking about tonight. We're on with Dr. Christiane Northrup on our Doctor to Doctor series, as well as Dr. Carolyn Dean and her husband, Bob, graciously joining us this evening as well. And this is what we are talking about, is the road to true health. And this strategy for dealing and dodging energy vampires is absolutely one strategy, and it's obviously an imperative strategy if you've got people like this in your life that are sucking your energy. And other great strategies are, the ones that Dr. Dean presents on a regular basis. I think it's important to diversify and talk about these kind of things. I think you brought a lot of light to the subject. Carolyn, what would you like to add this evening?
My gosh. It's I think it's a big topic. I think, Chris, when you said earlier there was a book that you overlooked for 4 years because you didn't want to face it. Hopefully, with this interview with people getting your book, they will come to realize what they've been up against. I do think a lot of women and men probably need that 40-day seminar or 40 days of introspection to come to a realization about making a big shift. Sometimes we just stick with something because it's familiar and we're afraid to make the change. So
absolutely, yeah. Especially if you think about it, especially after 30 years of marriage. George Simon talks about the slot machine dysfunction. You've been sitting at a slot machine for 30 years waiting to get the payout, right? And you just don't want to leave because you're sure that the next person who sits down is going to get the jackpot. And so it's kind of, you keep doing the same thing over and over, thinking that you're going to get a different result, and you don't.
Right. Here's a big question, though, and I've heard this and seen this, where a woman will finally, after the third or fourth affair, leave the husband, but then the children are so disrupted, she spends the rest of her life being guilty about what happened to the children.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Okay, here's what you find, and I've learned this from Melanie Tonya Evans, who she teaches a lot about this, and had a young son when she finally got divorced. If you stay in your own dance space, if you finally begin to value yourself you get to the point where you no longer feel guilty. You actually know deep in your bones that you saved your children's lives because you began to model something else. Now, what have we all been taught for millennia? You stay together for the sake of the children. And then what do? You cement in to their psyches for yet another generation a marriage where the wife is sacrificing herself. So martyrdom and self-sacrifice are the name of the game until you wake up. And then I can assure you from personal experience that a woman who actually wakes up and takes care of herself will become the kind of mother, the kind of grandmother that her children look up to. And then instead of seeing a deteriorated woman over the age of 50 who's feeling guilty and getting old and all the rest of it, you'll see someone who has completely reinvented herself that the kids and the grandkids actually want to be around. So you have to break that chain of martyrdom and self-sacrifice. And am I saying that that's easy? It's not easy, but there is more support for that than there's ever been. In the 50s, there wasn't much support for that. In the 60s, we had the 60s, so we had the strike generation. There was a little more support. Every generation gets better. Now, only 20% of women are getting married by the age of 30. So we have a very different time now than we used to have. But I would say to any woman, the more you can pay attention to your own pleasure. Now, what we're afraid of, you see, we're afraid of, oh, my God, if I pay attention to my own pleasure, I'm no better than them. Then I'm going to be the energy vampire. You're right. You feel so guilty, right? And so you have to celebrate the guilt. Okay, the guilt is your shadow. It's your shadow that says you did something wrong. You know, guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says I am a mistake. And so when you feel the guilt, I teach women, celebrate the fact that you feel guilty. That's your shadow. That's the thing that society has used to make you feel guilty, and your kids will make you feel guilty because they want to hold the family structure together. It's kind of unconscious. And you're not going to do it because you're going to realize that you breaking that pattern of self-sacrifice and martyrdom will save their lives. They'll actually have a role model of a self-sustaining, happy woman. Imagine that. Instead of what do we usually have? Insulin resistance, breast cancer, diabetes, depression, and a drug on the market who you don't want to visit. Oh, I wish you would come home more because I never see you. You know, it's like, oh my God, who wants to go see that person?
Yeah. Instead of, look, I'm busy tonight. Maybe we'll get together next month.
Yes, or, the high holy days of family obligation, where the mother is asking you in July if you're going to be there for Thanksgiving, so that her life has meaning. We really need to recover from this stuff.
Christiane, how many times have you had a major wake-up epiphany? Many times. But I would say that this energy vampire thing, when I began to do the work that led to this, that was like the biggest epiphany to then realize the number of these individuals that had been in my life as business colleagues, as friends. It was astounding to me, and that was a major epiphany. It all began with I called an intuitive, and I said, there's an individual, this is someone I worked with for years, and I said, I want to be sure that her energy is no longer
in my house. I'm a big believer in feng shui. Our stuff talks to us and so on. And she says to me, "Oh, she never left." And I'm suddenly freaking out, like, "Oh my God, she never left." Well, she said she comes into your house through something in your bedroom. So we're talking on the energetic level here. And she said, "What would that be?" And I instantly knew it was a book of explanation for tarot, which is a symbolic system that goes back a couple hundred years, and it was all annotated, and she'd bookmarked it and indexed it beautifully. And she said, "Yeah, she comes in through that book. So what you need to do is it won't be dissipated through fire. You need to put the book in water, and the cover needs to be separate from the inside." So I go and do this entire ritual with this book, and I'm doing a meditation, a divine love meditation, like Bob Fritchie teaches, which I've done with my business partner who's worked with me for years. And we'll often do a divine love meditation and pay attention to images and thoughts and feelings that arise for us during the meditation. And in this one, she saw, on my behalf, she saw all these different energy vampires coming up over the bank of my property, and she named them, and I knew she was right. And so I went out to my garage, and I got this very small hoe, H-O-E, and I began to draw a line in the sand of my property all the way around, and I had an abalone shell with cedar and sage, and I literally saged my property and said, okay, these people are no longer going to be here sucking my energy. And as I did that, as I began to realize how much of my energy I had given away trying to save these people, trying to get them to see their full potential, it was such a revelation. And then I began to think back on my practice, the people who reported me to the Board of Registration in Medicine, all from the fact that I was trying too hard to save them, using my own energy, getting into martyrdom and self-sacrifice on behalf of them and not paying attention to myself. So that was a major, major revelation that then led to all the research for the book and a couple of friends calling me, going through a divorce, and I realized right away they had been in relationship with narcissists that they were trying to heal. Then all the work of Sandra Brown, the super traits, George Simon. I began to put the whole thing together, and the book is the end result of that.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Does this apply to your, I assume you were married only once, though I don't know.
Yes.
I heard you had a divorce. This insight about energy vampires, does that apply to your divorce, or is that a whole different scene a long time ago?
No, that does apply to my divorce, but because we share children, I don't generally talk about that because it doesn't help them. And what I've learned long ago is when there are children, obviously my children are adults now, it's much more important for them to have their own relationship with their father, and I don't talk about it or bring it up. But that was absolutely, back then, this was a long time ago, no one had any sense of the word narcissist or energy vampire. I mean, there was no therapist who knew anything about this. I went through 3 years of couples therapy, and it did nothing but make everything worse. So believe me, I've been on the front lines of this with no support for what was really going on.
Right. Now, in the previous answer, you talked about Sandra, somebody, and learning things. When did the process that made the book start? You talking about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or less?
Oh, I would say this book, the process of it started with a vengeance in 2016, but it's really based on essentially 50 years of life experience and looking back and saying, aha, that that one, that one, that one, that one. And also looking at my family legacy as well.
You know, I remember Joseph Campbell talking about when people get to their 50s, 60s, 70s, he encouraged them to drop out of society, to not follow the rules that you had as a person growing up and then as a functioning person, maybe successful or not. It sounds like the insight you've got here is something that happens later in life, as Joseph Campbell said. You start to not be controlled by society, its emotions, its memes. What do you think of that interpretation?
Oh, I completely agree with you. And it's funny, you constantly peel the layer of the onion. So if we look at this astrologically, age 28 is the Saturn return. And that's when people have to go from being a kid to being an adult. And that's when all the rock stars killed themselves. Janis Joplin, Jim.
Yeah, the famous 27 marker.
That is it. That's it. That's the Saturn return. So that's when these people off themselves rather than grow up. At that time, my sister was killed and my dad dropped dead on the tennis court, and my 68-year-old grandmother died shoveling snow. So and all my patients were dying of GYN cancer. So that was definitely a wake-up call for me. The next big one for most people is the Uranus opposition, age 42. And age 42, that's when your soul, this is for men and women, says, what about me? And right around then is when I finished Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom and developed a big fibroid tumor. And so I remember once jumping up on stage in New York City, announcing to the audience that I had a fibroid tumor as big as my husband's head. Now, that was prescient. And then the other astrologic thing, age 52, is the Chiron return. You feel like you've died to your old life. And then the second Saturn return is age 58, and that's when you thrive. Instead of just surviving, that's when you thrive. And I think that's what they call in Chinese medicine the beginning of the second spring. It's like a second youth. But what I'm finding with this book is that it's not necessary for people to get to the age of 58 or 60 to wake up to these patterns. They can learn way, way sooner. Not always, not necessarily, but, for me it was important to write the book, get the information out there, then those who have ears, let them hear, those have eyes, let them see, and, bless the rest, and they'll wake up when they're ready.
There's some metaphysical sources that say the womb is closing and we won't be having families the way we do. So that makes me think that children are a big problem in what you're talking about, realizing children create the problem and they feed off energy vampire, something like this, naturally. So it becomes an interesting semantic problem how to define. What you're saying is a disservice, yet society's held together by it, by love as an emotion.
Well,
and children.
Yes, that is exactly right. But here's the thing. I love the work of Dr. Shefali, who is a psychologist in New York City, and she works with families and with children, and she said she's a major disruptor of this sentimental child rearing, where we try to prevent the child from ever feeling any distress or pain. And she said we cannot create in the jurisdiction of a child. She has a teenage daughter in the public school system of New York City. And I said, how do you do that? She said, well, I taught her to question all authority early on. And if she's going through peer pressure or any of that, it is part of soul making to be in the wilderness for a while. And I cannot prevent her from having that experience. In fact, this is what creates us as individuals. I think that we have overshot by trying to overprotect our children from what is. Now, if you are, let's say you are a mother and you finally realize you've been living with a narcissistic father who doesn't tell the truth, doesn't pull his weight, there's an app called the Family Wizard, and you just put down what your agreements are in this app. You cannot erase the stuff, so when he doesn't show up at the right time or he doesn't keep his word, you have a record of it. And when a woman or anyone who's in relationship with the energy vampire stops reacting, stops trying to get everyone to see, don't you see he's lying? Don't you see what's going on here? As soon as you go inside and you're calm on your own and you see the truth of your own life, then everyone else begins to see it too. But the minute you want everyone else to confirm your reality, you're in trouble. But it doesn't seem fair. And what they're doing is not fair. It's not fair, and you need to just go about your life anyway. And increasingly, our society is finally calling out these characters. So I think we're in a good place, actually.
All right, so I'm going to ask Ginny, what ideas that Chris is saying, Ginny, remind you of what Ion says?
Well, I think the primary one is the sovereignty of the individual. You know, yeah. Ion always emphasizes the sovereignty of the individual, and that within your own force field you are inherently empowered to be able to do everything, and you're putting yourself first. And through your own health, through your own self-centeredness, through your own sovereignty is where you're actually able to be impactful, not the other way around. And also that, you know, people who are in relationships with energy vampires have their own payoffs. Even though they're from a lesser perspective, they are still getting their inclusion somehow. There's some kind of a trade-off there. What do you think about that, Chris?
Oh, this sovereignty is the whole deal. I completely agree with you, and I think that's where we are heading. And if you look at it, it's evolutionary. So at the turn of the century, in 1900, the average person was dead when they saw their first grandchild born. So the life expectancy for a woman was about age 40, 42. So very few people even made it to menopause. Now we have, one of the fastest growing segments of the population is centenarians, healthy centenarians, people 100 and over. And till death do us part, for most of human history, was less than 25 years. Now what we're seeing is people waking up at about 25 years or so, and they're realizing, wait a minute, we don't need marriage so much as an economic unit, or as a friend of mine says, it's about progeny and property. That's what marriage has been about. Now we have relationships based on how can we co-create something where 1 and 1 make 3, where we really have a relationship that enhances all aspects of life, not because we need to be together economically and have 6 kids to run the farm. So I think that we're now at a time when we can even be asking these questions, where we can be looking toward our own sovereignty and our own fulfillment. I don't think think about it. Women got the right to vote in the U.S. in 1920. That's not very long ago. We're just coming up on 100 years. So we're talking about refinements, refinements of human experience.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Ginny,
Absolutely.
The major theme that I began with 10 years ago was the word healing. Ion refused to use it. He always said it was originally applied to your dog, controlling your dog. And I think that it might even get to the next book there for you, Chris, is this whole idea of healing people, which is the empath meme or the empath assumption. What do you think of that, Jeannie? The whole healing thing that Ion is really criticizes?
Well, because again, the whole point was that, and Chris brought it up earlier. We are now in a place that we've ascended to the point past 2012 where people can heal themselves now. You don't require the 5 people all gathered together using their magnetic field. And Ion did talk quite a bit about spontaneous healing and how people would have a force field that would be very electrified, and people could step into their field and they could experience relief and or a shift. But then they could also step out of that field and they could actually lose it because that field was not there to sustain the transformation that had occurred. And so Ion's position was strengthen your own electromagnetic field. And they started in 2009 with these statements. And, of course, then we moved into 2012, as Christiane said. Now we're well beyond that. And one of the positions of the RNA drops was that it is a strengthener of the electromagnetic field. So you do stand in your own power and your own authority. You're a sovereign being. You strengthen yourself, and you create your own wellness from your desire to be whole and to see yourself as perfect, whole, and complete. I mean, that's their position on it.
Well,
yeah, now were you going to say something, Chris? Go ahead.
No, just that makes perfect sense.
Okay, I'll just add to what she said. I hear people telling me a lot today, recently, very confident people, they understand a lot, are freaking out today. Something else is afoot in the world today that's causing intensities. And I think that's what Ion meant when things like the drops are going to help you adjust to a frequency change that was predicted by all the religions. And it's a frequency change in the altering of matter that may be what's bothering people today. So we're beyond the anthropomorphic issues that Christiane is saying, because the themes of her book could not be said in any society before our time.
That is exactly right. That is exactly right, and I completely agree with you that we are moving into a time. You know, Carolyn May, the famous medical intuitive, said we are becoming a new species. We started out as a carbon-based species. We are moving into being an energy-based species, and the children are different now. They absolutely are. So
Ion says, that point there, Chris, Ion says the children today, you know, the 12-year-olds, whatever, since the 90s, born since the 90s, are not like anything that's ever happened in human history before. They are totally, like, disconnected from everything we know about humanity.
That's right.
So,
yep. They're the new species, and I don't think that they are going to suffer these old energy vampires lightly the way we have. So,
right.
But
well,
you know, one thing, Bob, I want to say is I do agree. What you're saying is that we're beyond, but here's the thing, too. What I have seen from a therapeutic level is that people do need the validation to be able to let go. And when people are in these energy vampire relationships and they're being dominated by narcissists, whether it's in business or in their personal life, and they're so complex because of the psychological nature of it, if you can hand a person a book and say, here's what happened to me, and this is a classic kind of thing, and they realize, okay, gosh, I'm going to be okay, I can get out of this, so on and so forth, then they can let go, and maybe that will free them up to actually move into this wave, this transfer, this ascension that is being presented to us.
Yep, I completely agree with you, Carolyn. Yep. I need to get off the phone. Thank you so much. All right. Great.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us. Yes, we went a little over, but we're so grateful you stayed. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Much love and appreciation.
And I'll leave you with this thought. They teach courses in college, Kathleen Hales, how we are in a post-human period. The students are learning and hearing about that idea in college.
I love it. Okay. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Many blessings. Thank you. Thank you.
Aloha.
All right.
Aloha.
Live with Dr. Carolyn Dean, and we're so glad to have had Dr. Northrup for the time that we did. We just kept talking and talking and talking.
What happened to our hour break? Did you tell Bill just to ride through?
Yes, I did, because she was right in the middle of explaining how she got into the situation with the folks at the World Service Institute. So I didn't want her to be drowned out. So I'm going to go, hold it, Bill. And then we just kept talking and talking and talking. So it actually turned out to be quite lovely.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. That was great input from my Bob.
You're welcome. I'm an expert in these issues. We're talking my stuff when you get into what she's talking about. So this is achieveradio.com. Just there's your station ID.
Station ID. Now what do we do? How do you follow up something like that, Jenny? I'm ready just to hang up the phone. What are we going to do for the next 20 minutes?
No. We have 20 minutes. And, well, let's just review a few things, because for one thing, Carolyn, I think it was interesting, and we did get to talk about it a little bit, about the RNA drops that, Dr. Northrup is taking them. She feels fortified by them, and she said, I'm getting healthier and healthier. And as she, cleans her – I had to see. Excuse me. She cleans her own world up, and that's what Ion talked about so much with this ascension, this wave of opportunity that's coming to so many people. That one of the things that the RNA drops does is it really does help you break these chains, clear out these types of bondage, and move into a new position, new awareness, new perspectives. So maybe we could just talk
Ginny,
about that.
let me respond to that. This is where the labyrinth of the mind comes in, about defining what Chris is trying to define in her book. It gets really tricky how much you even need to define the condition you're getting into. That's why I, not so much jokingly, say that Carol and I are energy vampires with each other. But yeah, we're also empaths. So then you get into the quadrophenia. But the defining of our situation is difficult, and we require media and definitions constantly as part of our chip body. So we're going to get people describing the post-human situation, and that is the final seduction or delusion or trick, is the requirement to define what's going on to yourself. And I think Chris is
I don't know that this is so much what's going on, quote unquote, now as what has happened. I mean, I know that in 2009, several of my friends were absolutely obsessed with this whole energy vampire, narcissistic kind of way. They were in relationships with men who were like that, and they were trying to free themselves up. I don't know if you can even get to this degree of relationship, Bob. As you said, the young people are different. They're not going to tolerate it. The influence of technology may or may not allow it. And some of these huge narcissistic people, as you've seen, like the Harvey Weinsteins, are being outed. And they're not able to be predators like they used to.
All forms of institutions which are set up to communicate. Communication is being X-rayed and studied, which, of course, is what McLuhan and Finney's Wake did. I'm thinking the biggest story lately, I don't know where I read this, is that the millennials are very sad. And I'm thinking, just as you talked, Ginny, that they're not getting the proper definition of what's going on. None of the terms and institutions or memes fit what they're experiencing if they're disconnected from the human scale and they're in something new. We need a better definition of what's happening, and I bet you they would respond to that, because their minds require a statement of all the complexities they're experiencing, and nobody's giving an accurate statement of what they're up against and why they're changing.
Right.
Why they've been changed.
Why they've been. There's a lot of speculation, and like you said, they're sad. They don't know why. They're not sure exactly what's going on, and they do know that a lot of things that they are participating in feel particularly fraudulent, like their education and their employment.
Yeah.
And, what's it all about, Alfie? It's a whole different, kind of scene than it was in the 60s when we were asking that question. So I think, they've got a lot going on. But fortunately, you have what you on Tuesday night.
Yeah, the mind is such a part of our makeup, according to Ion, physical, non-physical, and labyrinth of the mind. And Ion says the labyrinth of the mind controls you. That is the dominant thing until you really are ascended and figure out how to use your mind. That's the issue here. These kids are not getting their mind part of themselves properly addressed, because when something is said properly, it resonates and people feel happy. Their mind, the third of their self, their labyrinth of the mind, likes the eureka sensation. There's not enough of that being provided to people. Though I think we do.
Right. Well, go ahead. But the point of, the RNA drops, Bob, as you know, the RNA relax and allow was to actually free people up from the labyrinth of the mind so that they would not have to spend so much time analyzing and becoming educated as much as they could live in a more of a spontaneous relationship, a quadrophenic relationship with their beingness, and just kind of create and have that slack and enjoy their life. So,
that's the issue I was bringing up about this change in the frequency. If we are becoming not human in a new kind of way, and we have all kinds of science fiction images of where that goes, but if we are doing that, nobody has a way of assuaging that except for us, the RNA drops, which is designed to adapt you to the frequency change, and that's why immediately people feel that they're not dominated by their mind anymore and the chatter they have, the self-chatter, and that's what's unique about the drops. Is they meet this situation.
Right. For people who are listening to the archive, the RNA drops are the RNA relax and allow drops. It's a play on RNA, ribonucleic acid, as well as relax and allow. That's the connection. And the point is that the RNA drops are a complex biological sugar. They're a super sugar, and they are harvested through a barley germination process. They are completely natural. There's no drug or psychedelic component to them at all. But through that process, the way that the sugars interact with the RNA and the DNA at a cellular level, that causes the replication of your cells to be more perfectly replicated. And in addition to the biological aspects of just the content of the drops, there's also a what would be a homeopathic or a harmonic that's involved with the manufacturing of the drops as well. They are in their 142nd generation, which means that there have been 142 different generations of the RNA drops that have been created, and each one of those carries a resonance forward and a frequency amplitude, so to speak. Each bottle of RNA drops that people use seem to have a different effect. Sometimes it has a different taste, and sometimes it has a different outcome. Sometimes people feel blissed out on it. Sometimes they can feel agitated if they feel that they're releasing something. It has great effects on the body. It has a youthful, energizing effect. It seems to have something to do with the telomeres and chromosome 14 and not doing the aging process as much. So there's all kinds of dynamics to the RNA drops, and of course it's all anecdotal. So we can't, we say all those words and then we have to say we have no proof. We just have lots of anecdotes.
Well, when
biological
Chris said,
sugar, let me just say to Shantae, a biological sugar means it's biologically compatible with our bodies. It's not like a high corn fructose sugar, which is absolutely not compatible with our bodies. Okay, go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was a very good description. When Chris was saying, dealing with the energy vampire problem, she said not even Remag and Remite can affect these people. I think the drops would affect the energy vampire. That's to be seen someday, but that's what's interesting. They get a new sense of harmony that their mind, which they're really good at using and communicating and fooling people, but if that is made on another level of relaxation, then they don't have their tool of manipulation anymore. So we'll look for that. Look and see if what the drops do to energy vampires.
And do you guys think that there are more energy vampires now in our current environment?
Yeah, because the digital media makes you a king or queen. Someone was saying, an old McClunite said, books, Xerox made everybody a publisher, but the Web 2.0 makes everybody a broadcaster now. A news broadcast, your own station. So that creates a heavy superiority complex by default. And that's what's complexifying this situation is the digital environment encourages an energy vampire for those who, and most people don't know how they got to this position where they're not listening to anybody. They don't listen to Wolf Blitzer anymore. They can declare themselves on their media about what's going on. So, yes, we got a really tricky situation here.
Yeah, so maybe it became more obvious to Christiane, and that, along with her beginning our products in 2016, she might have been energized to
see this.
Yeah, to expose this. But
I like her statement because I guess she's healthy. She's had problems. She mentioned some things, but she's an icon of health. And to say she's feeling stronger, stick that on our website, Ginny.
It's unofficial. Yeah.
Yeah. She's been very good to us. And on her website already, when she talks about her daily routine, it includes Remag and Remite. And
she states that?
Yeah. And then the other day she said, well, I'm on everything.
Wow.
So she's on the whole bundle.
Well, I'm waiting for Shirley MacLaine to catch up. She's the first celebrity to talk about you.
Yeah, right. So, it was a good show. I like the fact that Bob came in. We're doing an anxiety webinar on Thursday. So people will start getting messages about that. But I suppose now that we've opened up this dialogue about energy vampires, it'll be part of our discussion. But at the same time, I think we're nailing it because we tell people take responsibility for your health, and then they do start opening up in other areas. And for some reason, most of our, I don't know, maybe we should take a poll, Ginny, but most of our customers sound like they're already divorced and have stepped away from relationships that just don't serve them.
Well, Super Dougie, I don't know who Super Dougie is, says, way back there, said, well, I'm trying to be positive. I actually am tired listening to the guest who doesn't seem to take a breath. It's exhausting to listen to. Sorry to complain. Now, I think that's an interesting point here in the media diet, that you can't be a monologuist too long nowadays. Now, we don't mind doing it. We're monologists ourselves, and so we don't mind Chris doing it. But I find it interesting. What do you think? What's bothering Doug here? What is it about they are talking too much? Which is
it's a lot of information. She mentioned about 6 or 8 books and specialists, or a lot of words. We'll have Melody Rose list those when she does the overview of the show. There was a lot of information.
And everybody she mentioned I never heard of before. She's in touch with a lot of maybe non-famous therapists who are working on this issue that she's written a book about. Did you recognize any of the names?
Maybe one.
Right. So it's actually a pretty obscure. It sort of points out there's a lot of therapists who are doing. They're making up and improvising new forms of therapy for these new issues.
Well, the energy vampire thing, just like Ginny said earlier, that cycled back 20 years ago.
Yeah, I've heard the idea before.
Right.
Yeah, but I think at the time also that was just, okay, that person's an energy vampire, and then that's all you were left with. I think maybe Christiane has developed some kind of strategies to, put things in check and give people a way out of that psychological web, because it's pretty creepy.
Right. Now, my specialty is pointing out when something becomes well recognized and talked about, it's gone. Something else has taken place. So the new ground is going to create a new disservice or a new contrasting kind of personality, and the energy vampire, because of the virtual broadcasting nature of our media, becomes a figure. And that's an old syndrome. And now there's going to be a new kind of psychopath, or wouldn't even be those kind of labels. But I'm looking at what is happening now as that's going to catch people unawares. That's always being created, and Ion says that's the contrast that humans want. So if we start taking that basic human emotional thing, and I think Ion's statement, love is not emotion, is a force field, really applies to what she's talking about, to learn what that means or to figure it out. Then there's something new being felt and going to be expressed because humans are going to want contrast. That's the interesting point.
The new thing, Bob, is I think we would agree, and we've talked about for years, is that it has to do with the chip body. And this whole idea that you're held hostage in your emotional body is kind of, yes, 5 minutes ago. But people are struggling to understand their relationship to their devices and their relationship to other people and their devices. And now we've got AI in people's homes with this Alexa and, talking to the dot and all this business and make up my shopping list. And we've got automatic driving cars and all these things. And this is freaking people out. They're not sure what their relationship is to this advanced intelligence. And is it friend or foe or threatening?
They don't know what it is to be human. In all the cliche images we have of being human. And the basic problem with sociality is communication and all the relationships. Like if you're going to talk, I have to be polite and listen to you. Okay, so you're an energy vampire for 2 minutes while I listen to you, right? Or I can over-talk you. Maybe Sarah on her Saturday Night Show is a good expression of grievance about the situation because she doesn't mind talking over people. The issue with that in college, they're trying to determine whether they're human or not. It's probably not the right terminology to use. We just have a new technology that no culture's ever experienced before. The chip body. That's a new dimension.
But look what it's doing to everything.
It's wiping out everything.
It's wiping out everything. Christiane said, and I don't know this statistic, that only 20% of the population is getting married before age 30. That's ridiculous.
Not so much.
Let's also just say that marriage is no longer the entree into having children. A lot of people are having children without getting married. So, there's that piece, too. I mean, we see that all the time.
The chemical body just doesn't have a controlling emotion happening. I always find a lot of what Ion says actually is a good human level and aphoristic level of explaining what technology is doing to us. I mean, many people never would think that love is not an emotion. Love is the ultimate emotion. That's normal for people.
But we say it in a detached way, or Ion did. Love is a force field. And what Christiane is saying is you give divine love. And that still implies that there's some sort of
greater than us
feeling obligation to it, or
something greater than us. And I think that's an obsolete term. That doesn't work. You can start cults with that term, but it won't help you. Right. You'll get in trouble.
But I think she recognized that the force field of love is probably what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll start using that. But that can help shift people. Yeah, we're in a situation where the millennials, everything is disrupted, so they're sad. What's it, sad and
bitter?
Cynical?
Yeah, that interview said that. They're sad and cynical, something like that. Or they have too much choice also. Mm-hmm. So no tribal images. And that's what we see, all these different cultures trying to hoik up their tribal archetype, and that just leads to tourism. But no tribal images deal with this super godlike condition, what McLuhan called God-making machines. That's what we got here. And so we're ascending by default. And in the struggle of that, if someone who ascends by default, they don't have the images or the words to define how they got there. And that's what's happening to the millennials.
Oh, perfect words.
Perfect words, Bob. And I want to say we have a God-making machine, Michael in Boulder, and his birthday is today. And so we want to say happy birthday to Michael. He wanted to hear the children, so I said, okay, there you go. Happy birthday, Michael. You God machine, you.
And who is Michael? Is this someone we know?
Yes, Michael's called into the show several times in the last couple of weeks. He's one of our new customers, and working with Dr. Dean's protocol. Yeah, very, very lovely man. So we're so happy for your birthday, Michael. Great show, Carolyn.
Yeah, I think it's a very good topic to bring up some of our stuff that we don't get to talk about too much. We're on that onto this issue that she's talking about. Every Saturday night and on Tuesday, What Youth program. We actually are exploring those issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd say more on the straight and the narrow, huh, Carolyn? You and me.
Yes,
straight
on
narrow.
Monday. Yes.
That's right, on Monday, straight and narrow. Well, listen, everybody, it was a great show.
Yes.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Jenny. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bill. Yeah. Thanks, Christiane. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
They don't have FDA in
You've been listening to Live with Dr. Carolyn Dean here on AchieveRadio.com. Till next time, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
AchieveRadio.com. AchieveRadio.com.
Think of something you hadn't had in a while, like a crazy Italian cream cake.